for the final time, this is the Thursday night postgame show for the 2025-2026 Georgia State seasons plural, as Georgia State women and Georgia State men lose to the same team, Louisiana, in the first round of the Sun Belt Tournament in Pensacola on Tuesday afternoon/evening. The women fall 71-66 in what is game 2 of that tournament, and then one session later in the opener for the men's portion of the bracket, the Georgia State men's team falls 84-75. Their second loss to this Raging Cajuns team this season. For the Cajuns women, a little spot of revenge, as they lost to this Georgia State team mere days ago on the Panthers' senior day, and so kind of a reversal of fortunes there as far as those two games go. But the same result, and the ultimate same result in that there's no more Georgia State basketball this season. 71-66, as I'm just kind of like dive into it. I mean, full transparency, we expect to be talking to you again in a fairly short amount of time to discuss news that is going to break. It's just a matter of when the news is going to break. And we're just kind of privy to that officially happening before we kind of start that conversation. But I think anyone listening to this, first of all, thank you, especially at this point of what's been just a dreadful athletic season for Georgia State, for locking in with us through all the nitty-gritty. But for the purposes of talking about the thing that's going to come and not having to also rope in the recap on the games that happened, we'll also just kind of put a bow on the season. We're just going to get into it now. This is the post-game show. Starting chronologically, first in the day was the women's game. They let this one get away from them. They were up 20-9 at the end of the first quarter. Second quarter, shooting really started to slow up for them, which would be a trend for the game, as they shoot 35% as a team, 10 of 37 from 3. And they let the Cajuns hang around. It was trimmed to a 6-point halftime lead, down to a 2-point lead at the end of the third quarter, and then giving up an 8-0 run and a 7-0 run at separate times in the final 10 minutes. Georgia State is outscored 25-18 in the fourth. They lose 71-66, and we had said before in the preview of this week in the tournament that we thought that the women had a better chance just because of their draw, and part of that because they were playing a team they just beat, and it's a team that was 4-25 entering today. And so it's not like this is like an abject disappointment in the sense of like there were these massive weight of expectations for the way this tournament could go, but it was a disappointment in that this is a team you should have beaten, but kind of par for the course is just a lot of the same things keep cropping up with this team, and it ultimately is what cost them their season and their chance of surviving another day in Pensacola.
Yep. That slow, even quarter did them in this one, the second and the fourth. Obviously, the deficits in those quarters were extremely small. They, 5 in the second quarter and 7 in the fourth quarter, but that can be your ball game sometimes when it comes to these tournaments, What are the things that you and I are going to pull out of this? It's going to be the lack of a consistent third, fourth option. It's going to be the rebounding. I mean, it's been very frustrating because this team has done it in the exact same way. I wish, we could say that they played a great, it's not 48 minutes, right? No, I think it is. No, it's 40 minutes. Jesus.
Yeah.
I wish, you can tell it's been a long day. I wish I could sit here and say that they played a great 40 minutes and, there was a buzzer beater or, somebody else who is expected to go off just went off in this game. And, and I don't want to take anything away from Michaela Manley. She did go off in this game. But at the same time, though, this was a Raging Cajuns team that Georgia State had just beaten. And yes, the tournament is different. Yes, situations when you get to conference tournaments are different, but this was a game that you probably wanted to have. And it's unfortunate that they weren't able to get this one done.
Yeah, I had this pulled up, which was not related to what you were talking about, but I was going to single in on one thing. So if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, you've been looking at the second quarter stats for Louisiana for about 2 minutes. Just to point out that as this was the quarter that I felt like kind of set the tone for the comeback and their possibility of getting back in the game, Cajuns only shot 35% themselves. 0 of 3 on 3. They did go perfect 7-7 from the line, and a theme for them, especially with Manley, their leading scorer with 32 points, was making their foul shots and just kind of sticking in the game that way. But then you flip over to Georgia State, and they were 4 of 20, 1 of 10 from 3. 5 of 8, not great, not terrible on foul shots. 8's a weird sample size to kind of pick out, but obviously it wasn't 100% because that's what Louisiana did, and if they went 100%, then it would have been a 9-point halftime lead, and it maybe would have felt a little bit like less of a chance for the team. But when you let teams hang around, you're going to pay for it, and it's certainly at least going to be a dogfight down the stretch. And Georgia State came out on the wrong side of that. And this was obviously the first round. There was going to still be 6 more games in 6 days to make it and win the tournament. So, and the next game against ULM was going to be against a team that had beat you pretty handily in the one game you had played when you went to Monroe and played them. So it is hard to expectation set this as like this massive failure, but you want to at least end the season as the lower seeded team trying to mount the upset rather than being the first seed upset of the Sun Belt tournament, as this was the case for the Georgia State women today. Like, at the very least, if you're going to go down swinging, you're never going to have a bad loss as the road team in a conference tournament. Like, yeah,
exactly.
Whether in this case it'd be the 11 versus the 10, like, not a massive difference in seed line, literally the smallest it can be, but the expectations, as it were, would still have been on the other team. And in this spot, they were not able to manage that moment and just escape. Like, even with all that had gone on, where it was kind of sloppy after the first quarter, they still had a chance to just take it. And they had gotten it after one of the, Louisiana takes the first lead kind of early on in the fourth quarter. The opportunity was there when they went back and tied the game. And it's like, all right, you've played it level again. You've withstood it. And that's when the 7-0 run came. And it's like, if you have separate points where you give up, like, it was a 15-0 run spaced over different parts of the fourth quarter. Like, that is, you're not going to win many games when that happens. Like, if in one quarter of play there's any stretch of time where you are 0-15, like, that is going to be big issues for your chance to win that game. And so just weren't able to get across the line in this one and kind of salvage it after letting it get into a bit of a slop fest. And that's the way the season ends for the Georgia State women. Down to 10-21 in Gene Hill's 8th season as head coach. So obviously a disappointment, but maybe putting things in perspective of how they'd been in, a decent spot, not top of the league spot, is this is their first losing season since 2022-2023. They were 500 2 years ago. Last year, obviously winning record, made a run in the tournament to the quarterfinals. This was a step back, but it was a step back partly because they had a couple of years where things were trending up. So I guess you kind of hope, as I don't think a change is going to come here for Gene Hill, that year 9 they can get back on track and find the answers a little more quickly, because it just never felt like this team really gelled and had all of the pieces in place that they needed at any point in the season. And it is a big part of why it never came together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the decision maker here for any of this, but I would not think that there's any sort of job that's in jeopardy. I think, like you talked about last week and the week prior, the women's team, they just lost a lot of talent, and so the step back, you could kind of see it coming. I think it was a little bit bigger than we expected. We were thinking like a little Ray Allen step back, not like a James Harden 2021 step
back. All
the
NBA talk today.
Exactly. So it's unfortunate. Obviously, no one's going to be happy about this under, Georgia State's athletic umbrella. But I feel this one was at least understandable to a degree.
Yeah, and with both of the teams, honestly, as we'll get into the men shortly, can't say it enough times. They were playing on day one, the season had already been what it was setting up this moment. This isn't the part where if someone one of the top 2 seeds in either of these tournaments shows up for their first game on Saturday is when they finally play for the first time, and they lose that one when they only needed to win 2 games to cut down the nets, that's a whole different flavor. This is, you kind of had cards stacked against you, and largely for your own doing, over the course of the entirety of the season conference play. So just kind of the end of things there for the women as they assess. And I don't think the bar is too high for them to at least get back to pushing 500 again next season with some of the right moves, kind of looking at the roster, seeing how it holds together. Obviously, the biggest question is, as Crystal Henderson just finished her third season, where is she here next year? Does she go somewhere else in college? We'll have to wait on the answers for that, but that will certainly be kind of the biggest domino to fall as far as what the offseason looks like for the women's team. And then the rest, we'll kind of see how it all comes together. And I guess we can't offer the same level of expected job security on the men's side. Frankly, it's kind of a 2-and-2 thing. Like, I think partially the microscope, the men's program, I think is about to go under, or has been going under, might make it so where it doesn't make sense to do 2 job searches at the exact same time, which part of it's that Jean Hill has had some more success, especially relative to where the program had been in recent seasons, whereas that hasn't happened for the men's program. And kind of the shoe we all expected to drop happened in this one, even though on paper it was an even matchup and it was a team that it's the 13 versus the 12. It's another team. I think they also had 10 wins exactly coming to this one. Georgia State loses 84-75 in the first game of the men's basketball portion in Pensacola. This was one that it honestly went about as you could have hoped early. Jelani Hamilton scores 16 in the first half. The team's up 38-36, and that was with them even weathering, familiar from the women's game, an 11-0 run for the Cajuns that had given them the lead after, I think it's fair to say, Georgia State had kind of set the tone and edged things for the first chunk of the game. But salvage that, get a 2-point lead at the break, and then just nothing felt right in the second half. 9 turnovers, I think 5 of them in the first, like before the first media timeout, and then another 3 before the next one. The rebounding effort was just not good enough all game. Louisiana had 18 offensive rebounds, 20 second chance points, and it was from the first minute because there was right on, I think, like Louisiana's second or third offensive possession, they got 2 offensive boards. Jonas goes onto the court immediately, is shouting words of frustration in the direction of Christian Beam and pulls him from the game, and he kind of barely played for most of the rest of the game. And so when you're not rebounding well and you're taking out your 7-footer, it kind of speaks to theoretically that's the guy you think is going to help you rebounding better than anyone, and he didn't think he needed to stay in the game at that point. I guess kind of speaks for the level of just that never really came together. But as far as the rest of the game went, ends up being as large as a 13-point lead for Louisiana. And unlike the women's team for Georgia State, they had moments of doubt, but never really let it get in danger. It was as close as 6 in the final couple minutes, but they saw the game out. And fittingly for the way the season and the game had gone, a offensive rebound and a putback with about 40 seconds left for Louisiana is what kind of put the final nail in the coffin in this game. And similar story as far as Louisiana had kind of a star performance from Jackson Olvera, who leads all scorers, all players with 29 points, and he had 21 of those in the second half. And so in this one, where both of the teams had a standout scorer in one of the halves, it paid to be the one who had it in the second half, as Olvera was the guy. Jelani Hamilton with 4 points in the second half, even though it wasn't the case like we've seen in some past games where it was bad shooting percentage, like he was 8 of 12. He got in foul trouble, ended up fouling out, and just never got the rhythm going he had going in the first 20 minutes in the second.
And the fouls are bad. I'm sorry. I think, you see the foul trouble as okay. People, I think, over-exaggerate how bad fouling out can be. Yes, obviously you want to be playing, but I would honestly say that 3 of the 5 fouls were not good fouls, especially the last one. It's just how are you trying to play defense?
It was beyond the arc, I think.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a contact foul, touch foul. And when you have 4 fouls, I know at least I saw one person on Twitter being, not even a Georgia State person, just kind of looking at it and going, I don't think that was a foul. when you have 4 fouls, you cannot let the referee make that decision. You cannot breathe on the other player like that to even give him a chance to put the whistle in his mouth and give you that 5th foul.
And if he's in front of the guy too, like he was behind the guy trying to use contact to deny an entry pass that would have been doubled anyways. Like it was just a very odd play, and it just kind of really summed up the defensive effort personally in the second half, because it's just like it never felt like Georgia State was capable of stopping Louisiana in the second half, which is frustrating because it's not like, yeah, obviously they had 48 points in the second half, but it was just a track meet at the basket. It wasn't like, oh, they were, shooting a bunch of jump shots. They hit 2 threes in the second half. Georgia State did that thing where they just do not allow teams to really feel bad about their shooting in the second half.
Yeah, and this isn't like a track meet type of team that you're playing. It'd be easy to think they might be because Georgia State gave up 82 points the first time these teams played, but Georgia State makes up exactly half of the amount of teams that have scored 80-plus points against this Louisiana team has scored 80 against. I butchered that English language right there, but the point of it is Louisiana scored 80 or more 4 occasions this season, and half of them, 2 of them, were in the 2 meetings against Georgia State. So I don't know if that's just at the fundamental level they just got the scout wrong. Certainly when you're having issues getting rebounds and then you switch to a zone on occasion, just kind of like we're not getting stopped, so we need to go to a zone. Not going to make the rebounding issue any better. Like, famously, as Georgia State fans who were around for the Ron Hunter years know, like, going to a zone makes it harder to box out and get rebounds, and so you saw some of the kind of the trademark we've seen where it's like, all right, we're going to go zone for a couple possessions, and it doesn't really change much of anything, but it's kind of the wrinkle that Jonas Hayes has to throw defensively. And there was something on the broadcast very early on, and I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write it down or anything, but from when Matt Stewart and his color commentator spoke to the coaches before they got to the portion where they're talking back what Jonas said to them, he was saying something along the lines of, I believe in what we're doing, we're just not doing it well. And it's like, if that's not a telling quote of how this thing has gone through 4 seasons, that is still kind of the mentality as you're going to suffer your second 10-win season in 4 seasons. Like, if you wanted to say it's we believe in, we should be a tough defensive team and rebound and some of the things he's preached all along, then, obviously everyone says that, and so that is just kind of the common core. Of course that's what you're trying to do, but clearly the way you are getting there, trying to get there, trying to get the players you have on your roster to play like that, has just been an abject failure. And it does feel fitting that this was a game where rebounding really killed you. The other team's offensive rebounding, not getting stops when you needed to, and having a standout offensive performance through one half of basketball that you just could not keep going through the second half. All of those things we've seen countless times over the last 4 years. And so all of them happening all at once, it does feel like a proper coda in the worst ways for the way this team has been, as they've now gone 48-78 in 4 years under Jonas Hayes. And, that is likely all she wrote on that tenure as well. And it's unfortunate because I think everyone, he would have won the straw poll when this job opened of who people wanted to hire. Reasons to think it was going to make sense, but the worries that creeped in year one, even when you give a coach latitude of this is his first year, there's a lot of changeovers, kind of a late in the cycle hire, though that's no excuse really because he had the whole offseason, but there was a lot of but even from us on this podcast when the team went 10-21 in year one. And a lot of those same things that we were talking about then have still been issues now. And it's just been bad basketball for 4 seasons. And this is a team that won the Sun Belt tournament 4 times in the decade before Jonas Hayes got here. They've only won 1 Sun Belt tournament game in 4 seasons. They've gotten one and done 3 of the 4 seasons, including now this season.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound extremely rude, and I don't even mean it to be rude, but if we believe in what we're doing and we're not doing it well, what do we believe in? because I can't tell. And that's the frustrating thing. I think the only thing that I can say was a positive step forward this year was Georgia State was really good at free throw shooting. And hilariously, the last couple of games down the stretch, it's been like the one thing that they had that they've really lost. You know, and 78% from the charity stripe is good. I'm not going to tell you that that's bad, you know, but there's always going to be a team that's going to come around that's going to make 26 of them. You know, they're going to shoot.
And I forget what the point was in the second half. There was this stretch, I think it was maybe a 9-point or an 8-point lead for Louisiana. And Malachi Brown, who's been aces all year at the line, goes 0 for 2. And it's like, that can't escape this team at this moment when they're trying to mount a comeback. Like, and I think they made up the points the next possession down, but there's the butterfly effect, and it's just, even on a night where 18-23 is fine, like, that's about what their like top 10 NCAA average is in free throw percentage. But it was just in that little moment, it just still was going to be an issue. And it's kind of been the story with this team is there's not been a lot you can count on every single game. And like to win and win consistently, you have to have something you can lean on every single game. And even this thing that will go down as, I haven't looked at the full list yet. I know Jelani Hamilton broke the single season individual free throw record, but I have to imagine that the program record for a single season is around where Georgia State's going to finish in free throws. But it still escaped them in moments when they needed it, in this one, in some of the other games down the stretch. And so it's like the simplest thing that I could say to say why these 4 seasons haven't gone well is there just hasn't been an identity in either phase of the game that they've been able to every night count on. And that's ultimately a reflection of just a coach not having, whether it's not having the right ideas or not knowing how to implement the ideas, that's just been lacking from the off. And they've never, for any long stretch, been able to put that together.
And this is hard. Like, I want to be so clear. It is not easy. You know, and I'm not going to tell you that Georgia State fans took Coach Hunter for granted or Coach Lanier. That's not my point. I don't even know that that's necessarily true either. But I want to reiterate how hard it is to be in this position. Because there are a lot of schools who, especially mid-major schools, who will have that success of a Coach Hunter. And then, you know, get another coach that kind of continues the system when that coach gets poached. And then that third coach that comes in, that's when you start to see the cracks and things kind of tend to sag off. And you kind of look up and you're like, man, like, don't you remember when that was a consistently popular, you know, mid-major team that was fighting for the NCAA tournament, that was, you know, consistently making it to the last weekend in their, you know, insert conference tournament. I think about Xavier all the time. You know, when Georgia State played Xavier in the NCAA tournament, Xavier was in a great, you know, run of success. And I honestly, you would probably know more than I would. I can't even remember who their coach was at that time, but I know that
Chris Beck.
Was it Chris Beck? Okay. I know that after
not that many years later, they end up as a 1 seed.
Exactly. After he left, they continued their success, and these days, like, I see their name at the very bottom with that Big East, I believe. Yeah. You know, relatively floundering in albeit a very competitive conference. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that is the lightest of conferences, but still, like, it is something that happens, and it's frustrating that it's happened to Georgia State in this way, because it shouldn't be like this. You know, at some point, there has to be something that you can say, okay, Georgia State used to do this. They used to be known for shooting threes in the zone, okay? And then when Coach Lanier was here, they still kind of kept up the three-point shooting. What do they do well here right now? And I can't even say free throws, because it's like, it's a good thing, but it's supposed to be an additive, and it's not. And it's also additive. It's the only thing
that involves. It's also the only thing that the only person who has a hand in that is the player who is at the line. Like, the other team can't block your free throws. Your other teammates can't help you make the free throws, and so it's not like you can look at that as like, that's a thing that they've got the philosophy. They just make free throws. This is what they do, especially because, like you mentioned, it wasn't like it was this great thing that they have done all along. It's just this year, because they've got some excellent free throw shooters at the top of their roster, it got really good. and I don't want we got to save some talking points for the inevitable second pod we were going to record in the next day or two or whenever that is. We're going to try and be somewhat emergency pod level with it, but can't. We'll just have to see where the tea leaves fall, and but I don't want to dive too deep because there are certainly just kind of the big macro stats to pick out over the course of the seasons, and I want to try and keep this a little more strictly to the games at hand, just to kind of get out of here on time, but also that's what this pod is here for. And with that, I don't have a ton more to add. I mean, this is another one where you were going to be a more significant seed underdog. You're playing the 9 seed James Madison tomorrow if you win, and that's a team you lost to twice. And so again, the expectation was not going to be some deep run, and I'm sure nobody listening to this podcast is particularly upset that the season has come to a conclusion already. And possibly the people recording this podcast are not wildly upset about it either. It's going to be, I mean, there's bigger questions about what this team looks like next year on the roster side as well, but those questions will have to wait until we learn about the rest of it as well. If this is the last game for Jelani Hamilton or Micah Tucker in a Georgia State uniform, I mean, even if this team had done great, you kind of have to have those in the back of your mind of are these guys going to be here next year? Jelani Hamilton, should mention, picked second team all conference. The best scoring season anyone has had in these last 4 seasons. He averaged nearly 18 points a game. Certainly, I think if the team had been better, maybe he could have angled for being on the first team. But I think you saw Cesar Edwards had a stretch where he was pretty unguardable last season, but I think the Jelani Hamilton being the scoring leader is fitting because it felt like the guy who had been able to reach the highest peak of any scorer in these last 4 seasons. And then wherever it is, I am just fascinated to see what Micah Tucker does. I thought we spent some time on here. Obviously, we've asked Jonas about it in press conferences as well, leaps and bounds from where he came in as. And the floor, the bar was set as is he going to be a back out point guard for Malachi Brown this season? Is going to be help there? Can he play double-digit minutes a game? To where he's been playing 38 minutes the last couple of weeks of the season. He goes 38 tonight. And I mean, there's large stretches of the season where he was outplaying Malachi, to say nothing of backing him up. So I just we've spent a lot of time digressing about everything that's gone poorly, but don't want to leave it without just making everything about the negatives. There have been certainly positives to pick out as far as the individuals, and the team was fighting. And I think we are in agreement, and people listening are in agreement, that this team had people, they wanted to win, they were trying their best, they were not set up to succeed. And that's kind of the story of each of the last 4 seasons individually. And I think if we see players stick around, and if there's a new staff in place with changes that we expect are going to come, it would be amazing to everyone, I think, how much better they'll be as a unit, with just a better sense of direction that I think has just been lacking entirely. Lack of direction and ability to point you in it has been just not there, and leaves them 84-75 losers in day 1 of the Sun Belt tournament to Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, there is individual talent here, when we do a full season wrap and, kind of collect our thoughts on that. I think regardless of what happens with the coaching staff, I think you could go into next year and feel pretty okay with some of the things that you saw. And that's where it sucks, because it feels so blamey, that it's, I like your use of the word direction, because I can, even with Christian Beam, who definitely needs, an off season of, film study and getting in the weight room, I could see different spurts of the energy being there and the talent being there. I think him growing into his athletic body would do him some some serious good. But that doesn't mean that, he's going to be here next year in the same capacity. I don't even mean transfer. I just mean, who knows what's going to happen with that roster. At its core,
we're going to have a front court corner at some point about just this staff never developed anyone in the front court. The best players they had over the 4 seasons were guys they brought in that had been seniors and played a lot of time. The other ones, the guys they tried to develop, it just didn't happen. And so while you look at it, and I'm sure there's things over the course of the season that Christian wanted to do better and is going to look to do better at wherever he's playing next season, I still think it's a question of, was he going to get the chance to take that type of step without the coaching alongside to help him? And I just don't think that was ever there either.
Exactly.
So
really fast before we get out of here, just because you did mention Jelani, Crystal Henderson made All Sun Belt third team, so I did want to mention that as well.
Yes, and another one where, especially certain points in the season, the job that she was doing could have maybe warranted second team or first team, but the team had 10 wins, and so it's like you are graded on that type of curve with these all conference teams where Georgia Southern's women won the league and they had the player of the year. I mean, it's a tale as old as every conference across America every year. The teams that do well get the benefit of the doubt with these placements on these all-conference teams. But it was good to see Crystal get the recognition because obviously we've seen him for the last 3 seasons. She's a very good player and had some of those moments this year, had some game winners, had some really big shots. The game tied to send it to overtime against James Madison in a game they ultimately won. So, as we are in my favorite time of the year, non-sports division, Oscar season, it really is an honor for these players to be nominated, and it's good to see them get their due credit for the seasons they've had. And so I feel like having 2 players, one on each of the teams, when the teams each only won 10 games, is like the maximum result you could hope for. And so glad that it did happen, because we've certainly seen some bad Georgia State football teams, as an example, that maybe have some standout performers, but only maybe get the honorable mention and a guy here or there on the all-conference team, and the ratio is way out of whack, whereas I feel like it was totally, of 30 possible players, 2 of them are Georgia State, and I think that's a win for the players, and it is what you can take from a season like this.
Exactly. So it's a good achievement, for sure. Gone are the days where there's a plethora of Panthers, on the list, but it's still, you can put a feather in a cap of some good individual performances.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like I say, we're going to put this up tonight, just very late, so if you're catching this on Wednesday morning, you might know something before past us do, but we'll be back at some point talking about just kind of the lay of the land as the off-season starts properly. And also wanted to mention, obviously this happened tonight, didn't have many eyes on it because I was glued to the basketball and post-game, and put a piece up recapping both of these games with a couple of quotes. If this was not a sufficient recap on Panther Talk there, or 247 Sports. But the baseball team did lose 4-1 in Gwinnett to Georgia Tech. More of a pitcher's duel, but that almost feels like a bit of a win in the sense that this is still a really good Georgia Tech lineup. And so by holding them to 4, you gave yourself a shot. But guess what? A team who's in the top 5 in the country is also really good at pitching, and they get the job done. Still think that Brad Stromdahl would totally be happy taking a 1-1 split and winning the run differential by 2 in these 2 games. And other thing to mention, just as the last thing on this, is that Cole Roberts, who left the game with an injury last Tuesday against Tech, was back in this one. Takes the loss, but he went 5 innings, 6 Ks, 2 runs allowed.
Looked good.
I don't know that there was any real concern. I think they just, on the night, didn't want to throw him back out there with the little calf thing he was dealing with. But if there was any level of issue of, is he okay, he went out there and pitched tonight and threw 90 pitches. So everything seems good there, and now they'll get ready this weekend to go play at home against a currently 10-1 Charleston Southern team. So will be an interesting test. I think the best mid-major team they've played so far this year. And look, they split the 4-game set on the road at Belmont, so they didn't totally pass this last test. So at 9-5, could be an interesting weekend to kind of reset the tone. They hope get back to winning ways after losing 3 of the last 4. As we edge pretty close to Sunbelt play starting. It's really not that far away at this point as we have started the month of March.
It comes upon you quick. I know baseball, they play a lot of games, but it really does come up on you quick. I was, like timing it out last week when I was during the pod this past weekend. So it really does come up on you quick.
So yeah, just throwing a little baseball on the end of this post-game show as less recap there to say, frankly, I'm not going to spend like 10 minutes on the game I didn't watch. I want to give you everything on Georgia State baseball, but my attention had to be divided there on the basketball tonight. Covered 2 basketball games, briefly mentioned a baseball game. All of them were losses. So if you have made it all the way to the end of this podcast and all the other ones we've recorded over this cursed season, we appreciate it greatly. We will be back in your podcast feeds sometime in the near future discussing the direction of the Georgia State men's basketball program as we expect changes are down the pipe. Thank you for listening to this Thursday night post-game show. We will catch you next time on the Thursday Night Podcast.